Civ 7 can't get victories right. Let's fix that. Civ 7 is broken up into 3 ages, for now anyway. It's almost confirmed at this point that we'll be getting a 4th age, some sort of future age in which the game will actually finish, and these victory conditions will likely get revamped. Check out my previous video as to why I think that's a really bad idea. But let's crack into it, shall we? Starting with far and away the most controversial victory condition, culture, the geographic society. Definitely the most widely discussed victory condition at this point because it is so horrendously busted. The culture victory was in fact so poorly balanced that it got specifically called out to get, quote, significant changes in the first update to the game. Yikes. Unfortunately, these significant changes weren't really significant at all, and although some new functionality was added, the culture victory remains probably the least satisfying and least thematic victory to complete. So, what is the culture victory? Quite simply, to complete the geographic society, you have to house 15 artifacts in your empire. How do you get artifacts? Start by researching natural history. Notably, this is one of the 3 first civics you can choose in the modern era, and completing this allows you to make explorers. Now, dotted randomly across every continent on the map are ruins, except you can't see these ruins until you take your explorer to a museum or a university and take a turn to reveal all the ruins on that continent. But this is when things get a little funky, because you don't have to take an explorer to a museum or university to reveal the ruins on that continent. Once any player researches that continent, all players can see and excavate ruins on that continent. I guess it's not too big of a deal. After all, this is the first civic in the tree, so how much culture you have at this point doesn't really matter. It's only when you get to hegemony later in the tree that you can reveal a second round of ruins, which you'll likely need to get to that 15 artifact mark. But wait, researching with hegemony also reveals those additional artifacts for every player. Intentional? Seemingly, as this wasn't changed after the culture victory was revamped in the patch. So in reality, the optimal strategy for winning a culture victory is to pump out as many goddamn explorers as you can and carpet them all over the map so that when some other poor schmuck who actually dedicated his game to maximizing culture reveals the ruins for you, you can grab them all up faster than he did. So how do you win a culture victory in Civ 7? That's right, gold, production, and having a ton of cities spread across the map, probably from conquering them in the exploration age. Now, aside from the fact that culture is useless in this age for a culture victory, the act of carrying this win condition out is just straight up boring. You've built up this insane sprawling empire over 3 ages, but you win the game by spamming out the same one unit and walking them over randomly selected tiles around the map that you have no control over whatsoever. This is basically the same problem that the religious victory in Civ 6 had, and I hated the religious victory in Civ 6, as did many people. But wait, it gets worse, because they already had the terrible religious victory in Civ 7, and it's called the Exploration Age culture path. Stop me if this sounds familiar. The age starts and you research piety, the first civic in the tree, to get your religion. This unlocks a building that allows you to create your religion, which then allows you to produce missionaries that you can send across the map with the goal of displaying 12 relics in your empire. Do I even have to say it? The exploration and modern age culture paths are just about the exact same thing with a slightly different coat of paint. What's even more unbelievable is that somehow the religious gameplay of the exploration age is actually slightly better than modern, because at least with your religion you have some degree of agency over which beliefs you pick and how exactly you get your relics. Artifacts? Nothing. You will run across the map to completely random locations and you will enjoy it. So yeah, culture victory, you're going straight to D tier, where the D stands for disgrace. If I was going to try to get some easy wins for this one, first off, researching the ruins should only reveal them for yourself, not other players. I can only assume there's some weird technical limitations going on here and that's why it wasn't fixed. But if it's intentional for Axis, no it's not. Change that. And finally, make it so you can't produce explorers. You just unlock them via the civic tree, so you get, say, 1 from researching natural history, just 1. Maybe you get a second one with the mastery, you get a third one of political theory when you get your ideology, maybe 1 or 2 more with hegemony. Simple. Now you can still get in the race for artifacts from the get-go, but the player who invests the most in the civic tree is going to have a huge leg up. And this should also reduce the amount of explorer micro you'll have to engage in, and overall probably slow the victory down a fair bit. Maybe you could drop it down to 12 relics if it starts to get outpaced by the other victories. I'm not saying this would make the victory, S tier great, but it'd be something, in my opinion. I think realistically they've got to tear this victory down and build it back up from scratch into something like Civ 6's culture victory with tourism, which is, as we all know, the greatest victory condition the series has ever seen. Right, moving on. Military. Ideology. Now, I've got my gripes with the military victory. The name is a bit naff to start with, but I have to say this is probably the most fixable because it knows exactly what it wants to be. You're going for the military victory, you want to have the strongest army, you want to destroy other people's empires. Here's your motivation to go ahead and do that, if you even needed any. To finish the military path, you need to gain 20 ideology points. Conquering a city gives you 1. If you have an ideology, you get 2. And if the leader whose city you capture has an ideology that's different to your own, you get 3. Pretty straightforward here. You ideally do want a bit of culture to get going on this path, as it'll cut your workload in half once you have an ideology, but that does require you to get 4 civics before that kicks in. Not the end of the world. The third condition, where your opponent has to have an ideology, can be a bit annoying, because at least in my experience, the AI doesn't prioritise this at all. So this isn't the NBA, you won't be getting many of these 3-pointers, but it's a nice surprise when you do. I think this is a nice upgrade from the domination victories of old, where you had to take every person's capital, as this cuts off the domination at least for me, what feels like a more reasonable point, stopping the conquest from dragging on for too long and getting stale. I have to admit I'm not much of a domination player though, so I'd be keen to hear your thoughts below on that point. My main issue with this victory type is that you'd think that in order to win the military victory, just at a high level, you'd need to have the strongest military in the world, but that's not really the case, because you can take cities from anyone in order to get those ideology points. So really, you don't need to have the strongest military in the world, you just need to not have the weakest, because as long as you have the second worst military in the game, you can beat down the Civ who's coming last and get your points that way. After all, taking over this city is worth the same amount of points as this city. So for the military victory, you can go into C tier. As I said, I'm not much of a late game domination kind of guy, so I might be a bit biased on this one, but I think with a few quick changes, this victory could easily move up the ranks. Firstly, let's keep the ideology point system, as I think it works fine, but let's crank it up to requiring, say, 50 points, but capturing a capital city rewards you with, say, 10 points, regardless of ideology. You could shift these numbers up or down depending on the number of civs in the game. I think this would strike a better balance between no longer having to necessarily take out every single capital to win, but still rewarding players who do go for those much more difficult cities. This way, it leaves the option open to grind out the victory on random undefended towns, which can contribute to your points, but the real crown jewels here remain taking over enemy capitals. I'd like to think this could give the path a bit more diversity. Note that the numbers I've used here would definitely need a bit of QA to find the right balance. Saving the best for second last, the economic victory, Railroad Tycoon. Now, Railroad Tycoon, my beloved, much like the Treasure Fleet legacy path that came before you, is fantastic. This victory draws upon every aspect of your empire to get the W. This one's a little bit more involved than the others, so stay with me here. First thing you need to do is get to industrialization in the tech tree. This will allow you to build rail stations in your cities. These take up the whole tile, and if connected via land, this lets you quickly move units between rail stations, but that's just a side benefit. While you're building these rail stations, the next thing you need to do is research mass production, which will allow you to build a factory. Note, you can only build factories in cities that are directly connected to the capital via rail stations. If the city is over water, you'll also need to build a port, which you can get from researching the steam engine. Note that even with the port, you still need to build a rail station in order to connect it up to the capital and build a factory. So now you've got factories up and running, now you need to plug in factory resources. A lot of these you will have gotten from the previous ages, so you should already have quite a few ready to go, but you should probably be placing down new settlements to claim as many as you can if you haven't already. Each resource you plug into a factory gives you 1 point per turn. You can have as many factory resources as you can fit in each city, but note that they have to be the same type. So you can have 7 copies of coffee in the same factory, but not 5 coffees and 2 tea. You're now well on your way to completing the economic victory. Once you get to 500 points, you'll automatically get a great banker in your capital. To win the game, you have to teleport this unit around every other capital in the world and open a world bank branch. This costs gold and influence, but you get a steep discount if you're friendly with that civ. But let's be real, by this point in the game, they all hate you or are actively trying to kill you. Put simply, for every other player in the game, it takes 2 turns to complete the world bank. 1 turn to teleport to the capital, and 1 to open a branch. So if you're in a standard 8-player game, it'll take exactly 14 turns to win once you get your 500 points. Note that you do need to have revealed every capital to win. So yeah, economic victory. There's a fair bit going on. You need science, a wide empire with lots of resources, a ton of gold to convert your towns to cities, more gold or production to build rail stations, ports and factories in said cities, and then more gold and influence for the world bank. Now, overall, I think Economic Victory is really fun because it uses so many facets of your empire that you've been building up over the game. So Railroad Tycoon is going up in A tier. I actually don't think you need to change too much about this victory condition, to be honest. It's like a way more fun SimCity type victory. The only thing I would change is that I don't think you should need to build both a rail station and a port in order to connect your cities over water. It should be either or. This should make the victory a little easier because, frankly, the economic path is far and away the hardest to achieve compared to every other win condition once you know what you're doing. So let's map this out a bit, shall we? The modern age lasts 40, maybe 50 turns once you know what you're doing. To win an economic victory, you have to research 5 technologies to get to factories. Let's say best case scenario you have insane science and manage to research these in 4 turns on average. So that's 20 turns to get to factories. Let's go to the end with the Great Banker. In a standard game, you need 14 turns to teleport to everyone's capital. That brings us to best case scenario here, if no one's died, 34 turns to complete just those 2 requirements. So that gives us somewhere in the realm of 6 to 16 turns to get your 500 economic points, which is just completely unachievable almost all of the time. Even if you had a casual 50,000 gold lying around to instantly upgrade your towns to cities, purchase rail stations, purchase ports, purchase factories in all those cities, and you can fully deck them out with factory resources, it's just not happening in that time frame. Even if you're having an absolute dream game, the economic victory is always just about guaranteed to be the slowest. Because, frankly, if you have insane science and can rush to factories super quickly, you should probably just go for a science victory. And if you have insane gold generation to purchase all those buildings, you should probably just buy explorers and go for a culture victory instead. And if you manage to conquer a huge part of the world to secure all of those factory resources, you should probably just go for a military victory. Your empire needs to be absolutely peak in every area to win a Railroad Tycoon. It's like the everything victory. Hell, you even want a ton of influence to get good relations with the AI, to build the World Bank branches. Quite hard to do if you settled cities all up in their grill to secure resources. So yeah, might need to play around with the numbers a bit. Maybe 300 points would be enough. Maybe you should be able to purchase more world bankers for like 20,000 gold or something crazy. Considering this is the only victory condition that gets straight up harder when you have more players in the map, imagine trying to complete this path on a 52 player TSL map and spending 104 turns moving your banker around. It's just not future-proof at the moment. And my final grievance worth mentioning here is that the economic golden age legacy you get from the exploration age lets you keep all your cities as cities instead of downgrading to towns, which is alright, a pretty decent bonus. But for whatever reason, the economic dark age, this bad boy, gives you plus 100% production and gold towards rail stations and ports, and plus 1 resource slot in every settlement. Yes, you lose a bit of culture, but culture is the one thing you don't really care about if you're going for this victory. So you're actually super incentivized to not touch the economic path in exploration if you want to win the economic victory in modern, which is super clunky. You could easily swap these around and it would make at least slightly more sense. Anyway, Railroad Tycoon, A tier. Last but not least, we have Science, the space race. The science victory in Civ 7 is pretty typical for the series. Race to the end of the science tree, build a spaceport, or in this case the aerodrome, finish the 3 space race projects, complete the first crewed space flight, and you're off. Job done. Out of all the victory conditions, I would say science probably needs the least tinkering. I have absolutely no issue with maintaining the science victory as the simplest and most straightforward victory condition. Science victory can go in the B tier, just a solid, no fuss victory condition that knows exactly what it wants to be. If I was going to change anything, I would probably just give more interesting effects as you complete the projects. Revealing the whole map is cool, there should be more stuff like that. So if they really wanted to go above and beyond, I enjoyed how Civ 5 you had to also assemble all your spaceship parts and move them to your spaceport as units. In theory, that meant you had to have a big army to escort these spaceship parts. They're super valuable as you move them into place. In practice, of course, this never happened, but it was still a nice bit of flavour. I didn't mention in the individual categories either, but culture, science, and military all require you to complete a wonder after finishing their legacy path, and once that wonder is complete, that's when you win the game. It's a bit lame, a bit uninspired, it doesn't really add anything but a random production gate at the end. Science, sure. Culture and military, no thank you. And that's it. Let me know your thoughts on my proposed changes down below. What did you agree or disagree with? But that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching.